lead nurturing beyond the email inbox. I'm your moderator. I'm Sean Callahan. I'm Senior Content Marketing Manager at LinkedIn. We also have two other presenters here today, John McTighe, who's co-owner of Kuno Creative, an inbound marketing agency, and we have Andrew Hickey, who's Director of Digital Marketing at ECornells. And we're going to talk a lot about some of the basics of lead nurturing and some of the ways you can improve the lead nurturing programs you have. And before we get started, though, a couple of housekeeping items. We invite you to join the conversation and share your thoughts on Twitter, where we'll be using the hashtag #BeyondTheInbox. That's hashtag #BeyondTheInbox. We also invite you to ask the speakers any questions you might have using the Q&A box. And we'll take some time when we're done the three presentations to discuss your questions during the Q&A portion that'll follow these speaker presentations. We'll also be sending a recording of the webinar along with the slides to you via email after this event. So without further ado, let's get started talking about lead nurturing. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Andrew Hickey and John McTighe are going to talk about. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about lead nurturing beyond the email box, and I'm going to set the stage about how we're referring to lead nurturing, what we're talking about when we talk about lead nurturing, so that we're all on the same page here. And I'd also like to remind you again, don't forget that hashtag beyond the inbox. So, and I'd like to point our listeners to the fact that much of what I'm going to talk about today is covered in greater detail in our new guide, which was just released today, called the Sophisticated Marketer's Crash Course in Lead Nurturing. You can download that ebook. So I said we're going to talk about lead nurturing. So first, let's get that defined. We're calling it the process of building relationships with prospects until they're ready to buy. And these relationships can be built in so many ways. Email is a foundational one. Telephone with sales development reps or SDRs can be done in person at events, of course, or just face-to-face, and now it can be done with display and social advertising. And lead nurturing, one way to look at it is it's today's version of the Threemartini Lunch. And here's why I say that. In the Mad Men days, Don Draper and his compatriots would take their prospects and their clients out to lunch, and the talk would be friendly, it would be entertaining, it would be about the industry broadly, and finally it would be about the specific products and about the selling. And this was done in many industries where it was sort of a face-to-face thing, something that salespeople did. This is very similar to how lead nurturing works today, but now B2B marketers are using electronic content to build the trust with their prospects. That ultimately allows, in the end, a sales message to be transmitted to the prospect or the customer. So lead nurturing has changed. A large share of the responsibility for doing this, for nurturing leads, has shifted from the sales department and sort of an in-person kind of thing, or a one-to-one thing, to the marketing team, where it's often one-to-many, although the goal is for it still to be personalized as much as possible. And the reason for this shift is in the changes in the buyer's journey. Forrester Research has done some research, of course, about how up to 90% of the buyer's journey is complete before the prospect reaches out to a salesperson in some industries. The marketing department is the group within most organizations that really has the best view of the customer during this 90% of the buying process where the buyer or the prospect is remaining anonymous and doing his or her research online, by visiting websites, by consulting with their peers on social media, et cetera. And marketing, has really attempted to automate this process. For instance, marketers are able to use marketing automation software to nurture their known leads, the prospects who have actually shared their email address. And they can, of course, nurture those known leads through email. And this is a process that's at the best companies, the most effective marketers, it's always on. Marketers are sending emails to segmented parts of their customer base or prospect base that are based on a combination of the business demographics of that person and their online behavior. For instance, like a CMO would get emails very different than someone who's a demand gen marketer, say. And those are the kind of, a shorthand of the segmentation that can be done with this. And lead nurturing, as it's grown here in this nascent stage where marketers have kind of taken over lead nurturing in many cases, is that it's email-centric. And it's good reason. It's email is very effective, very efficient, but it does have its issues. The number one drawback is that 95% or more, or maybe if you're lucky less, don't convert. That is, they don't share their email address. Number two is that of the prospects who are sharing their email address, only about 20% of them or so are actually opening the email. So if you do the math, you're only reaching about 1% of the prospects who are coming to your website. So email has these deficiencies, but there are ways now that you can nurture anonymous prospects. Email is a single channel, and it only allows single channel nurturing if that's all you focus on. But marketers are now discovering some additional ways to nurture their leads that help overcome the deficiencies that email has. And many B2B marketers are now using things like display and social media advertising to reach these anonymous prospects, the people who have not shared their email address, but obviously have raised their hand and shown that they're interested in your business by visiting your website. In particular, there's a new product from LinkedIn called Lead Accelerator, where marketers can use a visitor's business demographics, their job title, their industry they're in, the size company they work for, and combine that data with information on their online behavior, what part of the website they visited, are they interested in product or interested in some other solution that you have. And using this data, they can, a marketer can serve really, really targeted advertising to nurture those prospects with sequenced ads, sort of the same thing that marketers do with email, except they can reach prospects who haven't identified themselves and shared their email address. So with multi-channel nurturing in mind, let's look real quickly into how do you build, an updated multi-channel nurturing program. And the building blocks of a nurturing program have kind of remained the same, but with a few twists. And the first thing you start with is strategy. And like almost everything in business, building a multi-channel lead nurturing program, a good one, begins with a good strategy. And the idea here when you're working on the strategy is to define what a good lead looks like for your company. Again, going back to this idea of the business demographics, what industries are good for your company, what titles, what size companies, those are critical if you can identify those. And then if you can add onto that, layer onto that, what behaviors are defining a good lead. What part of the website they're visiting, if you can track them elsewhere, what social media sites they're going to, et cetera. And it's critical these days to include sales in this process of developing, your lead nurturing strategy, because the salespeople, they're the ones who have the most visceral insight into what kind of leads end up generating revenue. The second step is defining your personas, which are the needs and wants of the people that you're actually marketing to. And this isn't really about job titles, it's about the human desires of your target market. And personas can help you develop the content that will motivate your prospects and nurture them towards a sale. And that's the third part here, is developing the content that really is tied to the persona of your customer, the one that's going to motivate them, that's going to move them, that's going to generate a sale ultimately down the line. And then, so that was the third thing. So next slide. And then the fourth thing is creating content based on your audience segments. After you segment your audience, no matter what the channel, you're able to really want to target your audience with a message that's personalized and tailored to them, and you do that with audience segments, and then you create the content that reaches that segment. You know, you wouldn't send a CMO the same kind of information that you would send to a CFO. They have different wants and needs, different way of looking at the world. So don't send the same messages to someone who bounced from your site, for example, as someone who came to your site and viewed multiple pages. One is much more engaged with the other and is in need of different content. So the next step is to test, measure, and optimize. A/B testing is an underused tool by marketers. It's something that's a fantastic tool in their toolkit, but they're definitely not using it as much as they could. And you can start using it to test on a very simple level different subject lines in your emails for those emails that you're using to nurture your prospects. You could also use different display and social ad creative in your multi-channel nurturing and test those, which ones are driving the best reaction. And even small percentage gains in open rates and ad viewership can lead to outsized revenue increases. And it all starts with testing, measuring, and then optimizing. The sixth thing is maintain a clean and updated database. There's a study out recently from Net Prospects, and this report found that 62% of marketers' database records were missing really key data, like what industry the prospect is in and what the revenue data of the company is for the company that they work for. And marketers have to keep on top of data, make sure it's up to date. You can do this often by incentivizing either your in-house sales or your field sales people to try and get updated information on the prospects and customers they're calling on. And without this important data, it's really difficult to be efficient and accurate in your messaging to prospects. And then the last thing here when you're building a lead nurturing program is to move, with an eye of moving beyond email with your lead nurturing. Many marketers find that email is the foundation of lead nurturing, but it doesn't have to be the sole method that you use to move your customers along through the marketing funnel. So new data-driven technologies and products really make it possible to nurture a wide swath of your prospects with display and social advertising, for instance, and you can reach your prospects, all of your prospects, not just the ones who have provided an email address. So the next presenter is going to be John McTighe of Kuno Creative, and he'll be delivering some insight into how to build a strong lead nurturing program. John, you ready to go?
I am ready. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. I am John McTighe. I'm with Kuno Creative, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about putting these best practices that Sean laid out so nicely for us into practice with a real campaign and give you some examples and some results on how we do things at Kuno. Next slide, please. Thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to go back over the email challenge a little bit more and add a couple more reasons why you might want to not just depend on drip campaigns through email. And really, I'm going to focus on targeted inbound campaigns because our feeling is that the key to converting leads into customers is really attracting highly qualified leads at the top of the sales funnel. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about retargeting, both pre and post conversion, a little bit more about lead nurturing these days and how it's done, and also tie in with the sales team. Next slide, please. So some additional things, I think Sean mentioned some really big challenges about people not opening their emails and so on, and part of that is just that we're all so overwhelmed with email every day that we often spend, an hour just deleting them and figuring out filters to block them. So we've become very good at blocking unwanted, unsolicited email. He mentioned the stale contact database too. That's a big problem. If you can't reach your buyers because you don't have the right email address, or maybe they've moved to another company, If you could go back one, thank you. Other things like filters and blacklists. If you do too much email and people are reporting you as spam, you know, we all know that. So you have to be judicious about how much email you send. And then the other problem, a lot of people are you know, more than half of us are reading our emails on smartphones or tablets. And so if that email isn't formatted correctly and you can't read it, the chances of it getting read are almost none. And then finally, relevance and context. You know, the emails we open are things that relate to our interests and are things that are timed correctly. They're things that we're interested in right this second. So those are some of the additional challenges. Next, please. So we start with buyer personas, just like Sean laid out there. What we normally do with ourselves and for our clients is to figure out, you know, who's the ideal buyer? Who do they want as customers? Who are the best customers, the most loyal customers? And so this particular campaign is for a segment of ours. We know that we're interested in selling to software as a service companies. It's one of our best performing markets. So here's one of our buyer personas. He's a CEO of a SaaS company. And we've kind of figured out through interviewing quite a few of these customers what makes them tick. And this particular guy is nerdy. He's into the numbers, you know, cost to acquire a customer or customer lifetime value, all these acronyms. These are things that these guys are interested in. So we need to focus our content on those things that appeal to this guy. They're entrepreneurial, so we'll talk about startups and we'll talk about growth hacking and all these things that appeal to people who are growing new businesses. And then the guy, this particular guy, we know from interviewing is somewhat quirky and obsessive. So we're going to play to that a little bit with some fun content. Next, please. So as Sean mentioned, we take these characteristics of a buyer persona and we segment our database. In this case, we're keeping it kind of simple. We're just going by industry and also by job title. Next, please. And then we use marketing automation software to automatically assign these personas. So when somebody signs up on a form that's relevant to technology TED, they automatically get assigned as that persona in the database. Or it could be some other triggers like pages that are visited, emails that are open, blogs that are read, things like that that are set up in order to appeal to this persona. And when they engage with that, the database gets updated. So from now on, we're just going to be contacting this person with relevant, contextually relevant data and content. Next, please. So how do we get to these guys? The people that are out there that we haven't contacted before, so we're at the top of the funnel right now. We're creating content like an ebook called SaaS Marketing for CEOs. It's something they're very interested in. We're telling a story about Shopify, one of the most successful SaaS companies of all time, and kind of how they went through their growth and the tactics they use, how do they measure their success. Things like that are in this ebook because we know that Technology TED is interested in these things. Next, please. So we promote the ebook by email. So we have our email database, but we go beyond that. So we also contact influencers in the industry. We build relationships with them. We do a blog post with them. They guest post on our blog, and we guest post on theirs. We also do our own blog posts. Talking about, you know, it's not a promotion, it's talking about the ebook, it's talking about the challenges that are highlighted in the ebook. We also promote on social media channels, and we also do targeted advertising on LinkedIn and other native ads because we know that that's where these guys will have the most chance of seeing this ebook and downloading it. Next, please. So it's interesting to note, you know, Sean mentioned that 80% of emails are not opened usually by the target. In this case, because it's so targeted, it's so relevant, you can see in the second column here, 99% were delivered. The second column is the open rate is almost 51%, and the click rate is almost 20%, which is about 2 or 3 times higher than what we normally see when an email is untargeted. And on the right, you can just see this is just an informational email. It's not a promotion. It's just sort of a challenge of ideas. So we're getting this guy engaged, and we're asking him to download the ebook to get more solutions. Next, please. Another thing we do is retargeting, both pre and post conversion. So what does this mean? Well, my company is from Cleveland, so naturally we have a picture of LeBron James here. And LeBron James is a basketball player. For those of you who don't follow basketball, he's camped under the basket waiting for a rebound. So if someone misses a shot, LeBron goes up and gets it and slams it home. So this is like a second chance at a conversion. And so a number of different ways of doing retargeting. One of them would be, you know, putting ads out. So if someone bounces away from your landing page and they're on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, they see an ad that is relevant to that same opportunity. So they can come back and convert on the landing page. The thing that we do is not just put sort of bottom funnel ads out there. We put top funnel ads at the beginning. So we're getting people interested in this content. It's helpful. It's interesting to them. So it has a much higher chance that they will come through and convert on it. And so we do this. Next, please. Then we also do drip campaigns. So we also, once someone converts on this top funnel offer, we send them additional emails. And on the right, you probably can't read this, but it's more helpful information. It's more detail about what was in the ebook. It's a follow-up email. It has links to blog posts and other helpful content. So the idea is, again, it's not a hard sell. It's just adding more value. And if you look on the left-hand side, you can see the open rates for, we had like 7 emails in this drip campaigns. They're all right around 40 to 50% open rates. So the engagement rates are still very high here. Next, please. Then another thing you can do with content personalization is to reach out to the people who are engaged with you, with the people who are in your database. Another way of nurturing now, since we know who you are, we know your persona, we can offer you additional content. So when you come to our homepage on our website, you know, normally you might see what's on the left here. It's kind of a generic message about need help, you know, with your inbound marketing. If you're a SaaS persona, if you're technology TED, on the right is what you'd actually see the next time you come back after you convert. So we're following up with you. We're giving you in real time information that you haven't seen before. And as you move through the sales funnel, as you engage more and more with our content, we're going to serve up additional messages to help you, you know, make that decision about working with us. Next, please. And then finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the sales team. So the best thing you can possibly do is integrate your sales and marketing efforts, aligning them, getting them to work as a team. And so that's what we also promote with our customers, is this cooperation at the level of content and engagement. So the sales team would typically have the same tools at their hands, at their fingertips, to monitor leads as they come in, as they move, say, from different lead statuses to, say, marketing qualified or sales qualified. And they can actually monitor everything that this lead is doing. Then the sales team has at their fingertips the ability to send them more content that is, you know, completely relevant to whatever stage of the buyer journey they're in, and also to their needs and interests. So we really think this is, you know, the wave of the future is getting the sales team involved, helping them to understand what the lead is interested in, and that further enables them to make more informed and more successful phone calls. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Sean, and we'll go talk with Andrew.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks, John. That was great stuff. You know, I'm especially a fan of getting marketing and sales on the same page. It's huge. So next up we have Andrew Hickey from ECornells, and he's going to talk about B2B lead nurturing. And Andrew, are you ready to go?
I am. Yeah. Thanks, Sean. So first of all, great information from both Sean and John. I found out today that I'm a technology head. I think I'm not an executive, but every other part of it, I think I've got kind of nailed down. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about some of the stuff that Sean and John touched on, and add a couple layers to it. So I'm coming from kind of the in-house side of things in terms of B2B lead nurturing. So I have kind of my own definition. I think it's probably matches up pretty well with what Sean described earlier. Definition of lead nurturing for me, in my mind, it's encouraging a lead through the marketing and sales funnel. It's a fairly simple, you know, explanation. And the reason, you know, you might see some other definitions out there that are much more robust and maybe much more defined. The reason I think we should all develop our own idea of what lead nurturing is so whenever we engage in lead nurturing efforts, we always have that definition in mind to kind of match up what we're doing and make sure that it meets this definition. So for my purposes and our teams at ECornells, you know, our goal is to encourage these leads, anonymous and otherwise, through this marketing and sales funnel. For you know, lead nurturing, you know, today is, you know, as we've both John and Sean have talked about, you know, they're almost always focused around email, and modern lead nurturing typically includes some type of automated component. That's kind of a no duh. I mean, that you can't look anywhere on the internet without seeing ads or something for some type of automated way to nurture your leads. I think there's one more point on here. Yep. And kind of hand in hand with the second point is there's now an entire new class of lead nurturing tools, tactics, and techniques. You know, it was mentioned a little bit about retargeting. You know, we've had some very recent experience with the LinkedIn Lead Accelerator product, and I'll be talking about that a little bit more. So that's just an example of some of the new technology that's out to support this this lead nurturing outside of the email inbox. So I would contend that lead nurturing and the way that it's developed and changed to kind of our modern iteration of it is we actually have a new B2B funnel. So the top left here, you see, this is kind of the lead funnel that we're all, you know, kind of have been exposed to. It. This nice kind of sleek, no rough edges. All the leads go in the top, and you see the, you know, 1 or 2 green arrows coming out of the bottom. Perfect. That's great. And the bottom left is kind of more of the reality of what a lead and a sales and marketing funnel looks like. We have leaks. Everybody has them. It's not, you know, it's not a bad thing. Shouldn't be embarrassed. I mean, even the top companies in the world have holes in their funnels. So the top right is kind of, again, in my mind, what I view our funnel to look like at ECornells. So it's kind of a combination. We have this filter shape, and there's holes in it, and we know there are holes in it. So what we do is we do our best to patch up those holes, and it's not always possible, but we kind of work on that in the background. And we know that people are leaving our funnel in a way that you know, we prefer that they stick around. So the bucket here represents kind of this new way or this new approach to lead nurturing. You know, understand that folks are gonna bail on your funnel, and have that bucket, in this case, a bucket there to catch them and to kind of, you know, so you can still continue to nurture them to get them back in the funnel and hopefully get to the bottom without leaking out any. Actually, this image, there's a little too many holes. This isn't really terribly accurate from the ECornells funnel. I think that would be awful. But best picture I could find, I guess. So the keys to catching these leads there's a number of them. and they kind of, some of them revolve around email, and some of them revolve around some other things. And I'm going to focus on the other things because we spent a lot of time talking about email so far today. So for us at ECornell and for our experience, one of the biggest keys for us to capture these leads is to tell a story. Because, effectively, it's called lead nurturing, right? It's not, we're not trying to beat people over the heads with like a sale message or, try to force them to do something that they're not comfortable doing. You want to appeal to these people with, in language that they understand, addressing issues that are near and dear to them, and, in a way that they can relate to. And it's all about telling a story. Sometimes I get some eye rolls when I talk about storytelling and marketing, sometimes from people around here. It's still kind of, I think it's kind of a foreign idea for some people. And perhaps it's the luxury of doing marketing in-house and not being on the agency side. But, we have the luxury of kind of, sitting down and really preparing this story and planning out this narrative really well. One of the second big points, and I'm going to elaborate on the first one and this one in just a couple of slides, but the second big point is understanding the technology that you're working with. Just a real quick anecdote, a couple of years ago, when I first started with ECornell, we were using Marketo as our marketing automation tool. It's a great tool. It's top-notch, one of the best-in-class tools that's out there for marketing automation. When we used it at ECornell, we didn't necessarily have the resources or the ability to commit as much time as it takes to understand the tool. Marketo is a really, really powerful marketing automation tool, and we weren't actually using it to its fullest extent, and we were actually getting distracted by the things that we could be doing in Marketo rather than really focusing on the nuts and bolts of it, which the actual practice of automating our marketing. So the more, basically the more you understand the technology that you're using, the better chance that you're going to have to actually nurture these leads and catch those folks who are bailing on your funnel. We've talked about this, go beyond email. It's the entire topic of this webinar. And it really is key. And I'm not, we don't have to go into great detail. Both John and Sean kind of captured that pretty well. And the last point here is kind of contradictory to the point above it. Don't ignore email. And I think some of the numbers that John showed are, we have some similar success with some of the email nurturing that we do, and it's for the exact same reasons that John said. You have to segment your messaging. You really have to know who you're talking to, and again, it kind of goes back to the messaging that you're using. So I won't really touch on those anymore, but it is important to go beyond email, but despite the fact that email in general is kind of a weaker way to reach people, there are some ways that you can really leverage it. We spend a lot of time at ECornell, doing a lot of testing on subject lines, and kind of doing a lot of that A/B testing that Sean was saying, kind of marketers in general need to do. So just to dig a little deeper into one of those points, the telling the story and planning your narrative. Again, just a quick anecdote from our experience at ECornell. When we started using the LinkedIn Lead Accelerator tool to launch some campaigns, I believe it was back in October or September, they had a launch team come up from New York City to Ithaca, where we're based, to Ithaca, New York. And we sat in a conference room, actually the conference room that I'm in now, and we sat all day, and we really just mapped out this story of how we were going to talk to people, and what the messaging was going to be, and what the succession of messages was going to be, how we were going to sequence all this stuff. I say plan twice, launch once. That wasn't the only planning session we did. I mean, that was the in-person one, but we spent a lot of time working on that. And it really did benefit. I think a lot of times, because just the fast-paced nature of marketing, especially digital marketing, it's kind of, it feels a lot like you got to just get it up live, and we'll fix it when it's live, and we'll pivot and iterate and be agile and all that good stuff, and that's all great. But there is really something to be said for planning, and especially when you're kind of getting down to messaging. I mean, not only does it impact your brand, but it impacts the health of your campaigns. Diversity in both medium and channel is crucial to catch these folks. So we at ECornell, we have a our professional development courses that we offer, they're across a number of verticals. And even within those verticals, there's a number of kind of sub-audiences or sub-segments and personas within there. So we have a lot of segmenting that we do. And we have to speak to each of those segments in a different way. And we find that different mediums work better with some segments, better with some segments than others, and different channels work better. For example, one of my favorite ad units of all time is the LinkedIn sponsored update, mostly for performance reasons, and also because it's one of those ad units that doesn't bother me as a LinkedIn user. So we find that the LinkedIn sponsored update works really well when we're trying to reach you guys, marketers, with some of our professional development offerings that we have in the marketing space. You know, and we definitely have to speak to marketers differently than we have to speak to, say, HR folks or folks in the hospitality industry. So make sure that you're speaking the right language, depending on what type of ad unit you're using, whether it's a LinkedIn sponsored update, something on Facebook, or, you know, a digital display. And again, you know, make sure that the channel that you're using is appropriate to reach the folks that you're trying to capture. This one is kind of a tough one for me personally. You have to be willing to change your narrative or tactic that you're using to get that narrative out there on the fly. We live, you know, in a time where there's no shortage of data. So, you know, to try to take the data that you have and you know, if something's not working, or if there happens to be a narrative or a particular thing that you're trying to do that's not that people just don't seem to be engaging with or responding to, you got to ditch it. You know, it doesn't matter, or at least change it. You know, all the planning that you put in, sometimes it can be painful. You got this beautiful story laid out, and then, you know, it's maybe you didn't really hit the nail on the head, so you got to go back to the drawing board. You got to be willing to do that if you're really going to be as responsive to these folks as they want you to be. And the last point here, as I kind of alluded to it, is using data to understand what's working and what isn't. And that's, I mean, we, you know, as marketers, like I said, there's no shortage of data, and you know, like Sean said, you know, one of the really important things is making sure that your database is as clean as possible. You know, ECornell, our database is fairly mature. It's you know, we have hundreds of thousands of records in our database, and we have a lot of information. And we struggle sometimes with how to manage that and cleaning things up. We're regularly going through and you know, making sure that we don't have duplicates and all that good stuff. So the better, obviously, the cleaner data that you have, the easier it is to understand. And again, using that data to modify to both, you know, if you have existing data to help set up your initial campaign, that's great. But if you don't, you know, be ready to use that data to kind of adapt what you're doing to nurturing folks effectively. And just a quick example of kind of how this smart storytelling has worked out for us. So this is just a screen capture of our LinkedIn Lead Accelerator dashboard. And there's a couple of things on this graph. Parts of this graph, you know, for a marketer, there are certain parts of it that are a little bit terrifying. Something happened, you know, around March, you know, the beginning of March, things dropped off. We'll get to that in a second. So the beginning here, it's plan twice, launch once. So this is our, you know, kind of the planning phase. Things start out a little slow. We're ramping up. We're seeing how things are working, and you know, and then we kind of go into our full launch as we move towards October. This high point in the middle, as October into November, that's really showing where we kind of diversified our mediums, the different types of ad units we were using, and the channels that we were using. So you can see we're reaching a lot of people there, and we're getting a lot of good data. And things kind of drop out and drop down just a little bit and kind of stay even for a couple of months. And then right around the beginning of March, our impression volume drops off the map, which is fine because that's what we wanted it to do. That's when we were willing to change the narrative or some of our tactics. So we saw some things were working okay, but I decided that we had to kind of refresh our messaging, and we have to rethink how we're reaching people. So we effectively took almost everything down as I kind of rebuilt our storyline and some of our creative. And then the last phase, you can see, where we're using that data, you can see kind of this incremental growth in the number of impressions that we're serving as we get more and more sure about, that we're reaching the right folks, and our data on the back end is showing, yes, we're regaining some of these leads. Yes, some of these leads are actually enrolling in some of our professional development certificate programs, and so we're kind of, and then at the very end, you can see things shoot way up. I can explain that, but it's not really exciting. We're introducing some new creative, so I want to kind of get a lot of data behind it and test it. Just quickly to touch on the other part about catching leads is understanding your technology. I shared with you the anecdote about Marketo. We actually ended up leaving Marketo in favor of Pardot, which we use for our marketing automation tool. Again, not because there's anything wrong with Marketo. Pardot is a bit of a simpler tool to manage, and it's a little bit more our speed. So one of the big things with technology is you want to make sure that you can track progress. It kind of goes back to Sean's point about making sure that your database is clean. You also want to make sure that you have the mechanisms in place to actually, follow these folks as they go through your nurture program. So, for example, with LinkedIn Lead Accelerator, we want to know, is it the first wave of creative that's getting people? Is it the fifth wave? And if it's the fifth wave, is it the second piece of creative in that wave? So, you can chop it up as finely as you want, but you just want to make sure that you can get that granular if you need to. Not everyone needs a giant marketing stack. This is something that you'll see in just a second. There's all of these tools. I'm sure maybe some of you have seen some of these graphics that go around where it's this huge list and all these logos on it. It's all the different marketing technologies that are out there. I think the last one I saw, you could barely even see the little individual logos because they were so small packed onto this list. You don't need all of those tools, and depending on the size of your company and what you're looking to do or the organization, you might just need a couple things. You might be able to do some homegrown stuff on your own. So obviously there's a lot of marketing technology on there, and everybody wants you to buy everything because they have the solution for you. But just make sure that what you're getting into is actually what you need and addresses a problem. More complex is not always necessarily the answer. And I would advocate for testing your technology as you would test a new campaign, especially when it comes to lead nurturing. The same way that you would A/B test, a particular piece of creative or, some messaging, I would suggest that you maybe take on a couple of tools. A lot of tools out there, we're talking mostly about services and software tools. So, a lot of them have free trials. So what we done in the past is we'll take a couple of tools, sign up for the free trial, and just match them head to head and see what the better experience is. And I kind of, made this point a bunch of times, get useful data so you can optimize your campaigns. That's kind of self-explanatory. We've covered that. This is basically the tools that we use. The tools that actually end up touching our lead nurture efforts. So this is basically our stack, our marketing stack as it relates to our lead nurturing efforts. So you can see, if you just click once more, I think I kind of separate into quadrants, right? So the top left, you got Salesforce as your CRM, Pardot as your marketing automation tool. Up in the top right, we have some Burst is our business intelligence tool. We use Google Analytics, and Visible helps us dig into paid search. Bottom left is GetRooster is a company that we're using for exit overlays, those little pop-ups that you see when people try to leave your site. A Visual Website Optimizer is our A/B testing tool. The bottom right is kind of the tools that we use to actually execute these campaigns. So we have LinkedIn Lead Accelerator at the bottom. And there's a tool that we just recently started using called AdStage that helps us manage campaigns. But your marketing stack can look, can look, very different than that. And that actually, is a great segue to the last point I'll make is not all lead nurturing is created equal. And I made the point a couple of times, but, and I think it all comes down to that first phase and not necessarily maybe planning out the narrative or planning out the story, but just planning out your strategy. And Sean made that point early on, I think. The more time you spend figuring out what you want, the less time you're going to spend kind of muddling through a bunch of stuff that is actually kind of keeping you back. So just kind of keep that in mind. Your organization, your company is unique, and your solution is going to be unique. So, kind of take your time and figure out what you need to kind of reach the goals that you have.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Andrew. That was some fantastic stuff, too. Really appreciate that. So now we've got a little time for Q&A before we close out this webinar, and got some questions from the audience, and please continue to send some questions our way. We've got these folks for another 8 minutes or so, so ask away while you've got them on the hook here. So first question, and I'll give this to you first, Andrew, and then John, please feel free to chime in. And you were sort of covering this at the end. There's a specific question about, do you have any specific marketing automation software for small businesses who have limited resources that you would recommend?
I don't have any specific recommendations off the top of my head, and the reason is because there are a ton of marketing automation tools out there. I think there's probably even some free versions out there. I'd be probably a little bit cautious about that, because at ECornell, the volume of leads that we deal with, I haven't really investigated in some of the smaller players in the space, but there's a lot of good content out there and a lot of good reviews about some of the smaller players. I'd be happy to dig in actually and follow up with anybody who wants to know a little bit more about who's out there.
John, how about you? Do you have some thoughts or maybe a basic framework of how you would sort of begin to analyze what sort of technology you might need?
Well, a lot of times what we'll do is really start from your goals and work backwards. So really, how much revenue do you need to generate, and what kind of conversion rates do you have historically? So what kind of lead generation volume are you going to have to get to those goals? And then what kind of traffic? So we'll start from that kind of analysis, and then we'll look at budget. If you were really a small player, like a one-man shop, basically, there's certain things you can do with WordPress, for example, with plugins for that. I know that Shopify, let's say you have an e-commerce solution and you're using Shopify, there's some tools you can use there as well. I think even GoDaddy has some tools you can use for a really kind of low-cost solution. We don't typically deal with those very often, being an agency, but off the top of my head, that's what I can think of.
All right, and there's a question, John. I'll give this one to you first. Can you elaborate on developing personas? And then Andrew, I'd like to hear about how you do that at ECornell as well.
Well, in our case, we're talking to our customers first. So we're doing services for our customers. And so our process is first to talk to the stakeholders in our customer's company. And that would be sales and marketing, people who are customer facing. We like to talk to customer service people because they also have a unique perspective. We'll pull in, an executive or two to get kind of a high level view of where they want to go in the business. And then we identify their customers, both good and bad. We like to talk to, success stories as well as failures to get their perspectives on what's working, what isn't working, what messages resonate with them, how do they like to be marketed to, what are the decision points, how do they go through the evaluation process. All of that comes together through interviews, and then we typically put together a report with recommendations on content strategy.
All right, and Andrew, how do you at ECornell think about personas or about the mindset of your target audience?
Sure. We have We have a lot of data at our disposal. You know, ECornell's been around for over a decade, so you know, initially we actually underwent a pretty extensive exercise a couple summers ago where we had all this data and we compiled it all. We kind of, you know, developed our personas based on that. And it was a great process, and we felt really good about it by the end of like the week, I think it took. And so at the beginning of the next week, our CMO comes in and he's like, okay, so you know, let's hear about the personas. So we go through our whole thing, and he's like, who'd you talk to? And we're like, well, no one. I mean, we looked at the data. And he's like, you have to get out of the office. You have to get out of the building, you know, kind of figuratively. You know, and you have to talk to people. Exactly what John just said. You know, you have to have actual conversations with people. And you know, it's tough sometimes because of the scale that we try to do it at. So sometimes we revert to surveying our leads and our students. We try to be as strategic as possible in the ways that we survey people, so we can get the best information possible. Our personas are always changing, and I don't know actually if that's kind of a normal experience, but we're always finding out new things about our audience, and you know, we're launching new products and new professional development programs, so we're kind of always in persona development mode. You know, some are a little tougher to wrap our heads around than others. Obviously, you know, for us, when we're trying to reach, you know, people in our marketing audience, it's pretty easy because we're the audience basically. But you know, when we're trying to reach somebody in, you know, healthcare, that's when we really find that we have to have some conversations with people.
All right, Andrew, I got another quick question for you. Did you hire a firm to help you understand the best way to implement Marketo or Pardot when you put those in? Or did you do that yourself internally?
We had help from a firm with both Marketo and Pardot, and quite frankly, it didn't really do us much good. It didn't. We ended up making probably the most progress on our own, and I don't know if that's a typical experience. I mean, we have some pretty savvy, you know, business intelligence folks and developers on our end, so we were able to kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting. You know, the firms that we dealt with, you know, they had good information, but it didn't really help us out ultimately. Okay.
Here's another question, and John, I'll start with you here. What's your advice on pairing lead nurturing data with actual conversions? Are there best practices for doing that? You know, making sure obviously your lead nurturing program is performing and driving revenue.
Well, I think the key thing here is that chain of communication between sales and marketing. So it's not enough to have high lead conversion rates. It's not enough even to have high SQL data or, you know, an increase in opportunities. What you really need is that feedback loop between sales and marketing so that marketing understands the quality of the leads that are coming in from the sales team's perspective. And that is enabled. It's difficult to do if you have a big firewall between sales and marketing, but if they're sharing the same data and they're making comments on leads that are both qualitative and quantitative, you get a lot further towards the goal of, you know, always or actually growing revenues from lead generation.
Andrew, do you have anything to add about how you analyze your lead nurturing process with how it actually performs once sales gets its hands on
Sure.
Sales qualified leads?
Yeah. You know, again, I feel like I sound like a broken record. You know, we do keep pretty good data on that, so we can follow these folks, you know, as they move through the progress. And I should, you know, you know, as John talks about the importance of marketing and sales working together, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that pretty much all of the success that we have as a marketing function at ECornell is because of our relationship with our sales team. We call them enrollment counselors because that's really what they end up doing. and we, we actually meet daily. Our marketing team meets daily with some representatives from our sales team, and we have this constant dialogue back and forth about different campaigns and different leads, and we let them know before we launch a campaign, and if users or leads have any feedback specifically about some type of marketing marketing collateral that they engage with on the path to conversion, our sales team is really good about letting us know about that. So I think a lot of people say it, and John said it well, but the relationship between sales and marketing is in my mind kind of a make or break thing.
Right, absolutely, totally agree. But that's all the time we have for questions. Thanks for those fantastic questions, and thanks to Andrew and John for delivering such excellent presentations. I think there was a lot of value in this today. Thanks for attending, and we'll be sending a link where you can get a recording of this webinar in the next few days. Thanks very much. Have a great, productive rest of the day. Bye.